All right, welcome back to the stream. Since I last streamed, I did a tiny bit of work on the economy simulation. I mostly cleaned up and fixed some bugs in the various steps in the simulation events. So things like publishing trade orders. I basically just made separate functions for all of these and wrote some of the code to properly do this. So publishing trade orders, filling trade orders, kind of looks confusing because it's pretty messy how I wrote it, but when we're calculating the purchase quantity, we're taking into account local inventory, and we're figuring out a desired resource quantity. So for food, for that district, we look at all the people, get their desired food amount, what they currently have, and we sum it all up. And for purchase price, we're doing stuff like the minimum purchase price is the price it takes to produce that item, and then the max price is the consumer demand, and then the weight, which value between these two prices the market is willing to purchase one of the resources for, is some interpolation based on this weight, which is the amount they need to purchase over the demand, the market demand. So I did a lot of stuff like that off stream, and the simulation's more or less working. And the other thing that I did recently, which I haven't finished, and this will be streaming today, is I ended up buying this Unity asset that lets you create graphs. And the reason I did this, let's take a look at what it's called. I ended up buying this asset called Graph and Chart Light Edition. And the reason I did this was I know I need to be able to create graphs to show the value of certain resources over time. And I realized for me to write my own graph and chart library, it would probably take me a week, and this seemed like a good return on investment. So what I'm going to be doing today is working on a user interface system. So rather than displaying text that's super hard to read just as a debug draw thing like this, this is really hard to read. I want to create an actual proper UI system for the game and be able to click on these different things and have a graph show up, and not have to have this text over the 3D game, but actually like build a proper UI. So that's what I'm going to be working on. And to start, I have a very simple like UI controller, and all it does is takes current mouse position and tries to like click on objects. And if an object has like a UI panel component, we can display the UI for that object. So this canvas is like the root object, and then I'm going to create a bunch of like different screens or UI windows below it for the different things in the game. So the first one is just going to be like I'll call it like default panel for now. And I'm just going to display like basic information here that's always going to be visible. My current thought right now is to create a different class for each UI panel. And I'm going to create a default panel and a graph panel. And the graph panel will be used for like displaying like a resource or something over time. And this graph chart is the Unity asset that I bought. And each one of these like panels that I'm creating is basically just so I can have references to the different game objects that I need in the scene. So like this default panel will have a reference to this text thing, this text Mex Pro field, and this graph panel, it'll have a reference to this graph object, this graph game object. And then the UI controller, which is like the manager, will need to just know about these different panels, so it knows like to turn them on or off. And we'll see. I'm just kind of organically building this. I will probably start off pretty bad design and hopefully make it better. So this UI controller needs a reference to the different like graphs. So for now, I'm gonna naively implement this, I think. So this is some code that just will set, it'll just modify the graph chart object. I'm gonna make a separate class here called selection controller. And the job of the selection controller is just going to be to like click on objects, and then depending on what we click on, route the event to the proper thing. And right now, since we only have UI events, I'm going to route it to the UI controller. And right now this UI doesn't know anything. So we have a selection controller, a UI controller, and we just rename some of these other classes so they make more sense. This isn't really a UI panel, this is like selectable. And this company object, so this represents a company in the game which produces like a product and can satisfy and sell the product to marketplaces. Right now it just has a simple component where we can say like what type of thing it is, and we'll say it's a company. And when you click on this, it's somehow gonna tell the UI controller like what panel to show and like what information should be in the panel. And the UI controller needs to know about the panels. Now, And I'm probably going to eventually refactor this to be just like a list of panels. But right now I'm programming to the concrete implementation because I don't yet know what the interface should be. Okay, so now the UI controller has a reference to the default panel and the graph panel. So we can do stuff in code here. So the very first thing I want to do is, so the first thing I want to do is be able to hide these panels. So I think we can just do GameObject.setActive to be false, and we can do it for both of our panels. And to show a panel, we can just set it to be true again. And when the game starts, we'll hide all our panels, and then we'll show just the default panel. And again, this is super hacky right now. There's a lot of duplicate code, but okay. So if you see what's going on, when the game starts, nothing's visible, or if we make both things visible, both of the graph panels, looks like only the default panel ends up being seen. And when we click this, this yellow blob here, I want the graph panel to be turned on. So if the UI panel type is company, we're going to show graph panel. Great. So now when I click this, this graph thing shows up. And let's call a function just to set some random points on the graph. and I want to be able to clear existing points. I wonder if, I don't know if this API, I don't know if this graph chart thing has a method for like removing categories. Remove category. We have to know what the name of the category is. Clear category. What's this do? Clears data. Clears all graph data. Wonder if there's any documentation for this. Right. Let's see if clear works. And the other thing I want to do is in the UI controller, if you press the escape key, it will go back to the default UI. Object reference not sent to instance. I don't have a reference to the graph. Should be some materials in here that I need to have a reference to. Graph line. All right, let's try that again. Cool, so now we have random graphs, and if I press the escape key, we go back to this UI. If I click this again, we get a different random graph. This isn't really fitting the screen. Let's see if there's some property. Fit to container. Alright, seems to be working. So I want to make this graph somewhat reusable, this graph panel, and I need to be able to pass in like information. Like if we click on a person, I want to show a graph for that person's stats, and if we click on a company, I want to show graphs for that company. So how to do that? So I think one way to do this is once you click on once the player clicks on an object, this object could know how to like show a UI panel. So rather than calling the UI controller, this thing could have like a function we could call show UI panel, I think. And if we pass in UI controller, we can have different implementations for this. I think that makes sense. So I'm going to refactor this a little bit, and we're going to go with an interface. Show UI panel. And for each type of like thing you can select or click on, we'll have a different implementation. So we'll have like the company, selectable company. To implement mono behavior and selectable and this component can have a reference to the company controller. And if we change the show graph panel to like take in a list of graphs that we can get from company controller, we can actually display the data for this thing. So we'll have selectable company, and we'll have like selectable person. Which will have something like this. And if so I think this is not working anymore because selectable is an interface, not a mono behavior anymore. I forget how this works actually. I've done it before where you can like use an interface with a mono behavior. Let me see how I did this. I think I did it here. Interactable. You just do a null check. Okay. And we can pass in the UI controller, which will delegate to the proper selectable implementation. And we don't need this anymore. Alright, so I'm just gonna make sure everything I did actually works, and then change this method to take in a list of graphs. So there's a little setup I need to do. I need to add selectable company to this, and it needs a reference to this company controller. Now I could probably get that at runtime as well, rather than like having to manually set up this dependency, but for now this is okay. And let me just do that at the prefab level. Okay. Awesome. So everything is still working, but now we have like a better flow. So the flow is now we have this selection controller, and its job is just to like click on things on the screen, and if you hit something, see if there's a selectable component attached, and if there is, I don't like this word selectable either. These objects have a UI. But what should we call that? I'll call it a UI panel for now. I think this is what I previously called it. Okay. Still works. We just customize how the graph looks a little bit. Okay. This asset's pretty good. It's pretty easy to work with. Just need to figure out how to make these lines thicker. Alright, I think that's good enough. Alright, so I need to be able to convert a company to like a graph. We're going to take in a list of graph things. Let's see. I had some graph class earlier before. Draw line graph, line chart. Alright, so assuming we have a list of line chart data, we just need to be able to call these things, and that should do it. Wondering if we could add multiple points at once. Add point to category. Looks like you have to add each one at a time. Doesn't take in a list. That's fine. There. So that's all the code we need to display a bunch of graphs. Okay, so on the company class, we need to be able to get data. So I'm gonna ignore the person graph for now. So we're just gonna pass in an empty list. And here Let's write a new method. Chart. And we basically want, let's see, new line chart data. Let's start just by displaying the number of employees they have, their inventory, basically we want to display all this information in a graph. So let's start with funding. Or available money. So this is how much money the company has. And since it's money, we'll do it in green or yellow. So right now this money metrics thing doesn't have any data or any values. So we need to figure out like at what rate to sample how much money this company has. And if we go back to this economy simulation thing, where is it? So we don't want to double sample. Like we only want to sample per day, and right now it's kind of error prone. I could probably fix right now if you sample twice a day, you're going to have, if I'm treating the x-axis as the current day, and you sample multiple times, we're going to add extra days that didn't really happen to the sample. So one way to do that is have like overwrite the sample while the day hasn't changed, but right now my metrics thing doesn't actually have a dependency on this current day variable. So if I were to sample like the money here, like how much money the company had here and here, that would be bad. So for now, I just need to like figure out where I want to do this sampling, because like companies also have this like collect daily production thing, which is where they update their inventory and then they pay all employees. So I basically need to figure out like at what point do I log a metric and make sure I'm not like double logging that metric. I think I'll do it at the end of the day. So in this pay all employees method, assuming it's only called once per day, we can do this. Money metrics, log, owner, balance. So right now companies are only owned by one person. So at the end of the day, after all expenses are like paid out, this company will log a metric for how much money that company has, and it's really how much money the owner has. So right now companies are owned by one people, and now when we call this show graph panel, we can ask the company, I think it's private, this should work. So if I click on this, there's no metrics right now because no day has passed. So I'm hoping if I just click forward in the simulation a bunch, stuff happens, but I don't see anything happening. Why is that? Okay. So this graph doesn't update very well. That's because I'm not, not calling set graph every time something happens, like something updates. It's only being called when you click on a company. Alright, I'm not going to worry about that for now, because that sounds like a harder problem to solve. And I don't think it's like strictly necessary yet. What I do want to solve is setting the y-axis appropriately, because I couldn't see any values on that graph. And that was because the y value was greater than 15, and I think we need to tell the graph to scale the y. So you get the max value. And I don't care about optimization, so I'm just going to get it here outside of the loop. Max y value. This just to me looks a lot simpler than maintaining max equals I would honestly rather just have this than trying to do something in another for loop. Performance only really matters for things that are going to be executed all the time. So I am hoping there's a way we can programmatically set one of these values here. It's called the vertical view size. And it's fit margin data vertical view. All right, let's try this out. See if we can at least see the whole graph. And I mean, considering person starts out with 10,000 money, and it changes hardly any, we're not really going to see much. After a few days, their current funds are only down to 9,900. That didn't work. We got an error. Line 34. Chart dot points dot max dot y. Oh. Vector 2 doesn't implement a comparison method. All right. Point. I keep forgetting what map is in C#. Average. Link select property. Select. Okay. All right. So now we're saying take this vector 2 and turn it into a list or an enumeration of just the y value, and then take the max. That should work. And let me add another graph here as well. So call it inventory. We'll do product. So update product after workday. Add okay. Now the y axis is scaling. But I don't know why the blue graph is hiding. Ah, using the wrong metrics. This also might be hard to see because the numbers are so far apart. And we need the max value out of all these charts. So this has to go here. Let's see. Chart dot select points. And then this we put here. And then this. Okay. So what we're saying here is select every chart. For every chart we have, get the points. And for every point, so it's like function composition basically. So we're taking the max y value across all our charts. And this is definitely not performant, but I don't care at this point. How do you spell performant? I guess JetBrains doesn't know how to spell performant either. Okay, let's try this again. Yeah, this is probably working. It's scaled to 10,000. It's just because the amount of inventory they have is so small relative to the amount of money this person has, you don't see it. So I'm gonna change that real quick, and instead of starting with so much money, you're only gonna start with 100, which isn't good. They need to start with more money, but I just want to see if this graph thing works. Current funds 100, 94.88. Okay, cool. So this looks correct. We can see they started at 100 money, and then as soon as they started like producing some product, and it looks like they're able to produce like 5 or 6 food every day. I need to add like a legend or like labels so we know which graph is which. But we can see they're able to produce this much food, and the amount of, as they're producing food, their money is slowly going down, which is not good. This is not a profitable company, so it's paying people more money than it is able to sell their product for, which means my simulation settings or configuration isn't really good. It's supposed to be sustainable, but and I also need to make this x-axis like a moving window as well. All right. So we have 2 problems to solve for this graph thing to work. The first one is it'd be cool if the graph could update it's like in real time without me having to click on the company again. So like make this graph like live, and then do like a moving average or a moving window. But for now, we're going to set the horizontal view size to be just naively do this. So the horizontal will grow. Actually, might as well just fix it now. Greater than 0. So our horizontal view size is so bad, but this actually works. Okay. Wait, I don't need to do that. That's my bad. Just do math f dot max. So all these display horizontal view size of 10 and grow it once we're over 10. That should work. So this thing's a mono behavior. Which means we could poll for changes on these like charts, and if it changes, we could like add more points, I guess. So we have to like diff the current points against this. It's kind of hard. Let's see. I have a very hacky way of doing this. So what we could do is have this thing update for changes every few seconds. So let's update every 1 second. Then here we could call refresh graph, which if we have some object we can refresh it. So refreshable line chart. And okay. So all right, this constructor taking a function. I think line chart data. Something like this. Return list okay, so we have this like class now that we can delegate a refresh function which returns a list of chart data, which is good. So back in this graph panel thing, we can say every 1 second we are going to get this thing here. That, and we're going to do a immediate refresh right here. Yeah. And we can call get charts here, calls this method, and then here we're going to do this. If that's not null, delete all this. Sweet. So in this class, show graph panel now takes in a refreshable thing, line chart. That here, pass in null. It's actually a bad idea, but let's not do that. New refreshable and new func. I don't know the syntax for anonymous functions. Okay. Maybe this will work. Okay. So because I haven't implemented the person graph stuff yet, we're just gonna give it a refreshable line chart that just returns an empty list. And for this one, we actually need to create one. So when we create a company, we're gonna say new refreshable line chart, and we'll give it get line chart data as the method we delegate to. So now we have the ability to call this whenever we want. We have a common interface that we can call. And all right, that should work. Unity crashed. It's not good. Okay. Let's see if everything works. Invalid operation exception. Sequence contains no elements. Okay. Right. If that actually gets rid of the need for this check. Try this again. Cool, it's updating without me reloading anything or clicking on the company again. So yeah, it's definitely a bug in the simulation. Like, shouldn't be able to hire people if there's no money. So this company went bankrupt. They're still producing product, which doesn't make sense. But this seems to be working. Looks like there's still a bug here. Okay, no more bugs. And looks like the system's working. So what I want to do real quick is do what we just did, but for the person class, or the person object. So right now in this simulation, it's just so these represent people, and we have things like hunger, food count, and money. And I want to be able to click on these and show their graphs. So to do that, now that we have this kind of set up in place, hopefully it's not that hard to do it. So add person UI panel person, which needs a reference to this. Save this prefab, and rather than returning this thing, we're now gonna get from person some metrics. So when a person's created, we'll also need one of those graph refresher things. So refreshable line chart, private setter, and get line charts. Let me just copy what we have from the company class for this. And then change it. So we have available money, hunger, So we currently have money, food, and hunger metrics. I'm not sure how these are getting logged right now. Log metrics during the tick. I think this should be okay. All right. So we create a person. We're gonna do new. So now instead of this, we can do I think this should work. Click on a person, and yeah, it looks like it's working. We have their money. I forget what this magenta color is for. It's like food or something. Also, their hunger is a negative value. I need to fix this then. So if we want to display negative values, we need the min here. Min y value. Min. Alright. I don't know if this thing actually lets us vertical view origin. I think that'll do it. So now we should be able to see the negative numbers as well. Okay. Sweet. So now we see negative down here because the food is like a negative value. Or sorry, their hunger is negative. Just the way I set up the stat. Hoping it goes below. So we're on day 30. They're losing money every day, but they're able to afford food. Enough food's getting produced. So I'm hoping once they run out of money, they can't afford the food. And they die. I need to be able to speed up the simulation. Okay, sweet. So now their hunger is going negative. Or something's going negative. I'm not sure. I need to add labels, but yeah, it's cool. I can click on different things in the game and see different graphs. So yeah, just to wrap up what we did in this stream, created basic UI controller, and right now we have like a UI for graphs, and when you click on these different objects, different UI panels are displayed, and particularly for the graph one, we have a reasonable way of creating very simple implementations where you can provide for some like object type in the game a function that returns a list of graphs to show, and then those can be rendered with this graph panel UI window class just by calling the setGraph method. So definitely like really messy, hacky code, but I think this is like on the right path. Like adding more graphs should be pretty easy for other object types. What I want to do next probably is rework this UI controller. So like the graph panel works pretty well, but we need like a good interface for showing the other panels. Like the default panel like needs a way, like refresh basic info, and right now I don't know how to get a reference to that basic info so we can update the text here. So I don't know how to do that right now, and I really want to create a UI panel for the marketplace, and for the marketplace I want it to have like multiple menus. So we can like have an available inventory UI window that can step into a graph, a more detailed UI window per resource. So that's kind of like the next work I have to do for this thing. But I'll do that in another live stream. So thanks for watching. I'm going to end the stream.